Alrighty, and welcome back. We're here with Mr. Evan Kugler of MMA Prospects. How are you doing today, Evan?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. It's a quiet day here in the lovely Worcester, Massachusetts.
Worcester, shout out.
Shout out 508.
Hidden gem of Massachusetts, I always say.
Very hidden gem. Very hidden gem.
So we're here for a little thing I like to call Prospect Watch. I'll
Yep.
go ahead and put this ticker down at the bottom. Now, I brought you on for this. A little bit of a spoiler in your name tag there, but you want to go ahead and give us a little intro to yourself and why you're coming on for this Prospect Watch segment?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, MMA Prospects, it's a page, it's a platform that gives, fighters that are kind of the up and coming, the future talent of the UFC, PFL. A lot of these guys really just don't have the recognition that they deserve. I mean, I started this page actually going to a small promotion in Maine, New England Fights. I was there in May of 2023. I actually started it because I was watching this card, and there's this guy who's now with Fury, Artur Minev. I think he's 4-0, 5-0 now, but at the time he was like a 2-0, 1-0 pro, and he was this insanely talented Ukrainian fighter. And I was like, man, these guys, like, surely he's got to have, a few thousand followers and big fan base and all that. But I look at, and nobody really knew who he was. And I was like, man, there should be some sort of promotional tool to get these guys to kind of the next stage. And so that's kind of been my goal. It's been my project, my baby for the last 2 years now, I think we're coming up on. So that being said, I think there's a lot of interesting action that's going on this weekend. Obviously, to fill the void of No-UFC, we got LFA 200, which is a huge card. LFA is historically on Friday nights, but this time around they jammed it into Saturday, which is awesome. It's out in Minnesota. And then just a lot of other good cards. You got BFL, Unified, KSW, a lot of different promotions that are out there. So with all that being said, I mean, as fight fans, we always kind of want to know who to watch. And so I'll give you kind of my top 5 for this weekend and the fights that I'm watching, the fights that I think are kind of the next guys that are on the brink of getting to the UFC or maybe the PFL. I'll start with 2 honorable mentions, actually. Cheyenne Bowers versus Shannon Clark, which is LFA 200. That's their co-main event. It's their women's flyweight title, I believe. Cheyenne Bowers, she's pretty untested. I think she's 5-1. This will be her first time fighting for a regional title. She's going up against Canada's Shannon Clark, who I don't know if you guys remember, but she was a huge favorite in Contender Series this past season. She thinks she's minus 600, minus 700. Her style is very hard to beat. She's an incredibly strong wrestler. She has some crazy submissions. I mean, her last win with LFA, she literally made a chick piss herself. So, she's very, very strong. She's got a great grappling base. It's very hard, like I said, very hard style to beat. But she went in against Eunice Dubin, a totally unknown Venezuelan fighter, and she got knocked out. She got clipped. Yeah. And it's just the name of the game. So we're going to see her go up against Cheyenne Bowers, who actually has a pretty similar style. She's pretty good grappler. She's got a lot of interesting submissions. She's coming off an armbar win against Veronica Borisova, I think it is. So we'll see kind of how she performs. I tend to lean towards Shannon Clark. I just think that she had a bad fight last time out at the Contender Series, but I do think that she probably grinds out a decision win, but I could see myself being wrong there too. It's a clash of similar styles. So.
Yeah, that one especially, the styles and the names, I mix them up. Shannon and Cheyenne all the time, Spider-Man meme, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be a good one. I think if this isn't in your top 5, this is an honorable mention. I'm kind of looking forward to the list.
Yeah. Well, there's a second honorable mention, and that's on Unified. That's out in Canada. That's in Toronto this weekend. Zach Powell versus Muhammad Ado. Similar story with Muhammad Ado. He was on Contender Series. He had a lot of hype. I think he was definitely rushed. I think he was 4-0, 5-0 when he got into the Contender Series. I was surprised to see him get onto Contender Series so quick. I mean, I think he had one opponent that was a 500 record and then another guy that barely had a winning record, which is fine. I mean, he looked dominant in those performances, but you usually want to see a guy take on a real legit talent before getting to the UFC. He went out, he fought John O'McAuliffe, really talented Australian fighter, ended up getting the guillotine choke, I think. He goes up against Zach Powell, which is a Canadian fighter, 8-2, talented fighter. He's fighting for his first regional title. He's got some interesting knockouts. I haven't watched a ton of film on him. I've seen a few of his finishes. He's got some good power. He's got some strong hands, but overall, two guys that are fairly untested. I think we've seen Moedo go in there against like I said, talented fighter on Contender Series. But I think the winner, this is an honorable mention really, because I think the winner here probably needs one more before getting a shot with the UFC, potentially Contender Series opportunity.
I think so. These guys are like going to be each other's best win by far, I'd say.
Yeah.
And it's a great fight. It's a great fight. The UFC doesn't often, aside from Contender Series, they don't often go straight from BFL. Straight from Unified.
Unified. I mean, at times you see champions who get an opportunity right from there, but again, pretty untested. Yeah. Like you're saying, it's going to be the best win for either of them. I think they'll need one more, at least one more. I could see a Contender Series shot maybe in the middle of the season this coming summer. So cracking into the top 5. I actually had this guy a lot higher, but he just recently today actually has a new opponent. His name's Boris Satanga Mbanga. He's a Belgian fighter he's fighting on KOF this weekend. He was originally he is a, let's see here, 4-0 pro, 8-0 amateur, and he's fought on both light heavyweight and heavyweight. Derek Lewis has always said that heavyweight's just full of guys that are, fat, out of shape light heavyweights or fat, out of shape middleweights. Boris definitely doesn't look that. If you look at him and you watch his style, he's this big, strong, true 205er. Could he potentially fight at heavyweight? Maybe. I see his style as, you're going to think this is an insult, but it isn't really. I see his style kind of similar to like an Austin Lane, but with a lot more talent. I think he's
the GOAT. What do you mean?
I think he has some impressive athleticism. He's going up against a guy. He was originally supposed to fight Lee Chadwick, which would have been a really cool fight. That's a British legend. He's fought PFL, Bellator. He's done all that. Probably roided to the gills. Can't pass the piss test, but but instead he's fighting Rafael Pessoa, which not really an impressive opponent. I think if you're going to watch that fight, you're watching it really to watch Boris and see how high his ceiling is. I think he'll win that in the first round, knock him out pretty quickly, potentially submission, but that's a first round finish all day. That's why it's number 5. But Boris, I don't usually get really excited or I'm really high on prospects early in their career, only 4 fights in, but if you watch some of his tape, really impressive finisher. He's the exact type of fighter that the UFC looks for. I can see 1-2 wins. He's in Contender Series easily. Maybe even a direct signing on short notice to one of the European cards later in the year. I don't know.
Shout out.
Yeah, there's a couple decent fights that are on there. I think that's really the focus. That's the one to watch if you're going to watch that. So number 4 is interesting. You got a guy that's returning. Former UFC fighter fighting again, pretty untested guy out of the Caribbean. You got TJ Laramie against Josh Watkins for Unified. TJ, he fought 2 tough guys. I think he fought Pat Sabatini, and I can't remember his second opponent, but had 2 tough fights during COVID. Tough break happens, but he's fighting a guy, Josh Watkins, who's pretty unproven. He's 16-1. He, for the longest time, was fighting with a promotion called Fighting Force, which is a Central American promotion. A lot of the guys that fight for that promotion have a hard time moving out of there. It just doesn't get a lot of recognition. A lot of those fights really aren't that interesting, exciting. And then to boot, visa issues are always challenging for guys in that region. So Josh Watkins finally is able to fight further north. He last fought with BTC. He beat Adam Asenza very impressively. He's 34 years old. I don't know if the UFC would be interested in a guy at that age, at that weight class, at 135 pounds. Who knows? But as 17, if he wins, he's 17-1. That maybe that's worth something to the UFC. I'm really not sure. It doesn't really seem like they're really going in that direction. But we'll see. TJ Laramie too. I think that'd be 3 wins. He's a BTC champ, which is another small Canadian promotion. With a win, could be back in the UFC. I can see a PFL taking a run at him too, or maybe Ryzen, his brother Tony.
Maybe Ryzen, GFL, who knows? For those wondering, his second loss, Derek Minner, he got guillotined in 50 seconds. You know what? I'm not going to talk about Derek Minner right now.
We need to flag that. Shout out James Krause. Anyways, number 3, heading back to LFA, welterweight title fight, Vinilto Antunes, Shamikal Magomedov. Both guys had very high expectations. Both guys fell short, just in different sub promotions of the UFC. At Vinilto Antunes, he's got a 16-7 record. He's got 14 knockouts, just an insane record. Exactly the guy that the UFC looks for in fighters. They put him up on DWCS against Islam Dulatov. I don't think you could probably have picked a harder opponent.
Oh boy,
that's a ranked fight if it's not in DWCS ranked. I think that fight's a very, very tough fight. I think he got a tough shake. But now he's going to go up against Shamikal Magomedov, 9-1 pro. He fought on tough. Got caught in a submission early against Omran Shabi, a Finnish fighter. It's a tough matchup too, but he's finished guys in impressive form. I mean, he's knocked out. He knocked out Alfonso Leyva in his last performance, I believe, and then he knocked out his last 2 prior to that as well. So, again, these are 2 guys that the UFC love. I think the winner is a shoe-in for a contract, potentially another DWCS opportunity, but I think both guys are finishers. They put on highlights no matter where they go. So then that's a pretty obvious one to watch. And then number 2 is another LFA candidate. You got Elijah Johns, Larian Douglas. Again, Elijah Johns, 10-2. He's I believe he won the title last time out. I can't remember who he beat. But decent striker. I don't know if he's super as exciting as the UFC is looking for in a guy, but he goes out and he's going to be fighting Larian Douglas. Larian Douglas, he's got 11-5 record, which really isn't lights out record. It's not a shiny, 10-0 record, but you look at his last 3 fights, he's got some highlight reel knockouts, just crazy, crazy knockouts. He fought Nate Garib, and he made it look like, like hot knife through butter, just really impressive finisher, finished his last 3 opponents. Again, another guy that I think if he wins, I mean, depending on how it's done, even at 12-5, you're an LFA champ at that point, 4 straight finishes. I think there's definitely an argument.
Short notice call up or something, yeah. Definitely. I could see it.
And he's a West Coast guy too, so maybe there's a California card that's coming up, or maybe something in Vegas. Definitely can see it happening.
For those curious, Alfred Walker was the opponent he won the title against. I'm talking about Elijah Johns, of course. I ranked Walker very high despite his record. That was a really good win.
Yeah, he also, if I remember correctly, fought Javier Garcia, he's going to be fighting for Cage Warriors title pretty soon against Harry Hardwick. But he fought Javier Garcia, and I believe, if I remember this correctly, Johns had the submission. They called it, but it was like too early. I can't quite remember the fight. I remember it was really weird. And they actually overturned it after the fight. Usually, we've seen submissions that happen and it's called too early. What was that? Was that Christian Rodriguez that had the? I don't think it was him, but
you're thinking of Mota versus what's his name?
Mota versus I can't remember.
Trey Ogden. Yeah,
Ogden had the submission, and then immediately, I think it was Mark Goddard was like, "Oh no, it was a bad call," and they called it then. But in Javier Garcia and Elijah Johns' case, they called it like a day after. They appealed it which you never see. You never see. Anytime you see a fighter go appeal, like it never works. But one of those rare times when it did. But number 1, you got to be watching this fight. I think that. It's BFL. It's the only BFL fight that's on the top 5, but it's the one that matters the most, in my opinion, and that's Riley De Silva versus Drew Brokenshire. I mean, Riley De Silva is my prospect of the year for 2024, my North American prospect of the year. Really nothing else that you can ask for better in a guy. Extremely talented striker. athleticism off the charts. 2024 he had 3 wins, 3 finishes, potential knockout of the year. If we're talking about, he had a spinning backwards wheel kick knockout against a 5-1 opponent, Drake Randall, if I remember. Really impressive win. And, with another win, it's easy pick to get into the UFC. I think he's been a fight, maybe 2 fights overdue for the UFC. 29 years old, in the middle of his career. He's fighting a guy, Drew Brokenshire, which I think Bradley's to a point now where he's such a big name in Canada that I think he just can't find an opponent.
Yeah.
Drew Brokenshire is 38 years old. He's fought BTC. He just fought with BTC. I don't know. Maybe. I think it's a case he just couldn't find an opponent. So Bradley De Silva, he's the guy to watch, man. If there's anyone that you got to be watching, that's the fight you got to be watching this weekend. So LFA 200, I wouldn't miss any of those fights either. LFA always delivers a great card.
That's a wonderful card. We've been talking about that. Yeah, De Silva, I mean, with Grant Laramie and Ryzen now, not a prospect anymore, I'd say he's probably Canada's number 1 prospect, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say him. Rodrigo Cezinando is up there. He's probably right up there. I mean, Rodrigo's won 3 different weight classes. I'm hearing rumors that he might be on Tough. I heard he's in kind of the last round of interviews. Yeah, there's a few guys, and I think he's probably at the end there. I think let me put it this way. BFL has, I believe, 4 title fights on this card. There's only 1 champ that they didn't put on that card. They said there was a reason for it, and that person would be Rodrigo Cezinando. So I think it's a case of Rodrigo's probably on that final list. They just haven't given the okay, and I think he'd be probably a favorite to win that tournament. So
yeah, I'd say so. You got the 5 actually. You've got an amateur title fight on BFL now. Now that's interesting. I noticed you didn't say you didn't have anything from Cage Titans. No Don Shanis. No, he's not on your prospect list.
Yeah. I don't want to say anything too negative about my New England people. I'll be with them this weekend, but I think there's some interesting fights there. Do I think it's as good as what LFA is putting on? Like, I'm a huge Cage Titans fan. I think they're probably, in terms of production, in terms of environment, I think if there's any card that you can ever go to, it's a Cage Titans card. There's just nothing like it. It's a lot of fun. It's in this like blue collar New England area. It's just it's a different vibe from any other regional promotion out there. So I think there's some interesting fighters on there. You got Don Shanis fighting. You got this kid Ozzie Martin. He's making his pro debut. He had 2 knockouts that were he puts on absolute bangers. He should win that fight pretty easily. You got a lot of different fights that are on there. You got Jack Congdon, who's a local kid. You got Tom Paliarulo. Like, you got some good names that are on there for that card.
You got some good names. You got the OG title I'm seeing on Tapology.
Yeah, King Champion, I think, is fighting for that.
Yeah, I bring up Cage Titans. I don't want to break any news to expose anybody, but are we going to see an MMA Prospects sighting this weekend?
We might see that, and an MMA Roundup, MMA Prospects collab on site would absolutely do numbers, and that might just be happening this week. And I've heard rumors, unconfirmed.
I've heard rumors. Sources say.
I'll talk to Mick. I don't know, man. We'll have to find out.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Evan. First segment, I'm sure we'll have you back at some point in the future. UFC doesn't do that many weeks off, but 40 something a year. We're going to have some need for some prospects in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you? MMA Prospects, is that
MMA
everywhere?
MMA Prospects on Instagram, MMA Prospects with a Z on Twitter. I'm way more active on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok as well. I post, but it's pretty much the same video content on TikTok as it is on Instagram. Instagram's the best resource for me. So find me on there. Posting about the best prospects, all the prospects for the future, the UFC, PFL, KSW, all those major promotions. So check me out.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Evan. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. If you made this far, no UFC, but it's going to be a good weekend of fights.
Hell yeah.
Friday.
Thanks, guys.